Prologue to Machwa's Journey. Venora's eyes shifted to look up from his reading as he spoke.
"Welcome, prodigy. What brings you to associate with an outcast?"
The visitor held out a small crystal to Venora, who took it. The old man held it in his hand and looked at it for a long moment. His eyes showed thought, and after a time grew wide.
"I see."
The visitor nodded. Venora pushed the parchment he'd been reading aside.
"Perhaps Jehovah is trying to tell you something. Have you taken it to the council?"
The visitor spread his hands with a sigh.
"So you've come to old Venora to find your path. You realize that by doing this you put your position with the council in jeopardy, do you not?"
The visitor nodded. "I do, but what else can I do? Did not Deja himself say that the voices of truth are often silenced by the kings?" Venora chuckled, folded his fingers together, and narrowed his eyes at the younger man.
"You are wise not to consider such things as your position in this world important. Are you certain that what you've shown me is real?"
The visitor closed his eyes. "Without doubt. It cannot be anything less with how it torments me each night." There was a jingle on the table as Venora tossed a bag there. The visitor looked at the bag and then lifted a brow at the old man. "Gold?"
"If they will not listen and you are prepared with a conviction to place at risk your ties with your homeland, then you have a possible course."
The visitor licked his lips and tipped his ears back. "Alone?"
Venora chuckled with a hint of a smile. "Never. If this dream is from where you believe it is, then there's a power far greater than any in this world that will be with you."
He leaned back in his chair and grunted as his old bones settled.
"You will be headed to First Shore and then move to seek Barumath first, yes? To go to Windleham would be of questionable effect, considering its ties."
The visitor clicked his tongue and looked at the bag on the table. "I'm not certain I'm ready to take on such a mantle. I feel small compared to the task. Do you see no other way? Perhaps you could convince them." Venora leaned forward over the table before him and narrowed his eyes. They grew hard.
"I was your teacher once, and when I was, if you'd asked me such a thing, I would have growled at you for attempting to avoid this task."
The visitor's tail grew still, and his eyes closed. His ears pressed back over his mane. "You speak the truth. I feel shame that you must remind me." Venora leaned back in his chair again and crossed his arms behind his head.
"In truth, you need not. If I was your age, or perhaps even mine, and in your position, I might feel as you do. All great people in history span cower from greatness at one point or another if they're not foolish."
He watched his former student's ears perk up again, and he shared a smile with him.
"Do not fear what you do not see. Trust in Jehovah and do not lose heart. Even if none stand beside you, it is no excuse not to stand."
The visitor stood silent with his tail lashing behind him and nodded. Venora reached for his parchment again and glanced over it.
"Remember, prodigy, that peace and freedoms are quite expensive. When the good become complacent and refuse to push back against the ambition of the wicked and foolish, evil prospers. My voice has been silenced and banished by those who have grown fat in their contentment, but Jehovah has sent you to me that I might advise you. Speak out. Speak out and save the world from the darkness you see. Money and advice I can give you, but only you can walk your path. Others might see reason where our homeland refuses to."
The visitor took a deep breath and reached for the bag on the table, causing the coins within to jingle as his hand gripped it. "I suppose I shall need this, then, and also a great amount of Jehovah's help."
Venora lifted his eyes and smiled at the younger man. "There's a reason I first called you prodigy among us. You were born for events such as these, and are equipped to the task."
He stood and pressed his palm out toward the visitor, who touched his to it, and his eyes filled with conviction.
"Rise up in your faith, and use your skills and wisdom you have garnered beyond your years. Stand, fight, and give it every effort to do as Jehovah would have you do. Focus on his will. If you do this, he will prosper your journey beyond what you can imagine on your own. He who rides a tsunami fears not the opinions of the coast."
Venora drew back and sat down.
"Now, go and leave me to my studies. I will be interested to see the fruits of your efforts in good time, and am expectant. If you return home first, I'd advise you not to mention that you spoke to me. But you know this."
The visitor nodded and turned to walk from the round room.